Great. Well, welcome to all of you, and a very particular warm welcome to you, Auditor-General. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and we really appreciate you giving the time. You're in the hot seat, and we really wish you well with it. You've got a vital and strategic role to play with you and your team. So welcome everybody from the private sector, from government. I know there are a lot of people from the AG's office in this flash forum. And thank you for everybody for joining and putting it all together. The Auditor-General has had many different experiences. I'm not going to go into her CV in detail, but she's obviously qualified to do this role, having spent a lot of time in the accounting profession, has played a major role in different institutions, and as Deputy AG, I gather Deputy AG runs the admin, as I understand it, and now she's in the hot seat. So we've got someone highly qualified to play this very, very critical role. I've been reading a bit of background, and there's clearly very major challenges that have come up in this latest report. Many of them seem to be ongoing, AG. So I'm going to give you the floor. We'll follow the structure of giving you the floor for about 15 minutes or so. And then I'll follow up with some questions that we can explore. And then we'll open up to the audience. And I'm going to ask you to post your questions in the chat. That will help us coordinate them a little bit. So welcome to everybody. And AG, the floor. You know, I'm used to working with governments. I'm used to saying DG and sometimes SG and now AG. So welcome to you, Auditor-General. It's Tsakani Maluleke. It's a privilege to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Prof, and thank you for that very kind introduction. Greetings to you, the university community, and all the guests, the alumni. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be your guest for this very important and timely dialogue on local government audit outcomes, and for an opportunity to, together with you, take a deeper look at the state of local government. This is an even more important time as we prepare for the next local government elections, where citizens, when the time is right, where citizens will have an opportunity to once again exercise their democratic right to elect their public representatives in the local government elections. The American writer and philanthropist, Dr. Steve Maraboli, once said, "Wisdom stems from personal accountability. We all make mistakes. We own them, we learn from them. Don't throw away the lesson by blaming others." Now, these words are relevant for our discussion today. We should all accept that our municipalities are certainly not operating at the desired level, and it is time that we fix them. We have a unique opportunity to learn from what was done before, to take advantage of the lessons learned, so that we can build a local government administration that is accountable, responsive, ethical, and responsible. If we manage to do this, then the prospects are ever more encouraging. The upcoming elections provide an opportunity for the elected public representatives to build a better administration, and they can do this by appointing capable, qualified, and committed public servants that are fit for purpose and want to change people's lives. The Municipal Finance Management Act, the MFMA, lays out the responsibilities of these public servants. And they specifically set out that public servants must have a duty to promote the efficient, effective, and economical use of resources. And the Act also specifies that there's a need for high standards of professional ethics, accountability, and transparency. Just a few weeks ago, our office tabled the 2020 general report that you referred to, Prof, and we themed this report, "Ethical and Accountable Leadership Should Drive the Required Change." And this was a clarion call for ethical and accountable leadership to drive the changes that are necessary to bring about an improved local government. Our call for leadership to drive change is based on worrying trends that indicate that there is still a lack of progressive and sustainable improvements, which are required to prevent accountability failures. And this is clear from the fact that our recent report mirrors the reports that have come before it. Of utmost concern was that despite marginal improvements in some of the areas, the outcomes of this fourth administration regressed overall, going from the 33 clean audits that they inherited at the beginning of their tenure to the 27 clean audits in the 2020 financial year. In our report, we also shone a spotlight on the 22 municipalities that received disclaimer audit opinions. And they received such disclaimer audit opinions because they failed to provide us with enough information to conclude on the credibility of the financial statements that they were publishing. At most of these municipalities, we observed leadership instability, both at political and administrative level. We observed poor council oversight, significant financial health problems, a lack of consequences, and ineffective interventions from provincial government. We encourage that in our discussion with the leadership within government, there is some determination to change things. We're also pleased that the ruling party is equally seized with this task, with the president having been reported to have put the matter firmly on the agenda. In Parliament, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, as well as the Standing Committee on the Auditor-General, have taken our concerns and committed to address them with the relevant authorities. So these moves, these articulations of a commitment to change things certainly are encouraging. Ours as an audit office is not to take our eyes off the ball, but rather to monitor that the corrective action is indeed implemented, report on progress and the impact. And we believe that change will be realized if municipal leaders, supported by their provincial leadership, commit to transforming local government into capable, efficient, ethical, and development-orientated institutions, as envisaged in our Constitution. Now, going back to the words of Dr. Ramaboli, let us not throw away the lessons learned, but rather take advantage of this opportunity to bring in new leadership that will lead us to the change we want to see. A leadership that is willing to tackle fraud, corruption, malfeasance, and introduce good governance and operational efficiencies and drive the requisite accountability. A year ago, we tabled a report for the 2018-19 financial year, and we themed that report, "Not much to go around, yet not the right hands at the till." And my predecessor, the late AG Makwetu, warned that local government finances are strained and that we require urgent intervention. He warned that short-term solutions are not going to bring about the change needed and that such solutions tend to be costly and ineffective. In our new report for 1920, poor outcomes remain. Finances remain under severe pressure. And this is important to note that this is before we take into account a full year of the COVID impact. What we're seeing is that there is non-payment by municipal debtors, there are poor budgeting practices, and there's ineffective financial management. For some municipalities, there's also significant doubt about whether they'll be able to continue meeting their obligations in the near future. Almost half of the municipalities are exhibiting indicators of financial strain, including low debt recovery, and inability to pay creditors on time, and recording operating deficits on their income statements. Just to give you a snapshot of the financial health and the financial management practices of our municipalities, I'll just give you a few statistics. This year, we reported that fruitless and wasteful expenditure was at 3.5 billion rand. And this mostly related to interest and penalties incurred by municipalities when they make late payments to creditors, particularly Eskom, SARS, the water board. We reported 22 billion rand of unauthorized expenditure. 9 billion rand of that related to non-cash items, highlighting that the key line items of recording impairments or preparing depreciation so that you can have reserves to then replace infrastructure going forward, those disciplines are not there. And therefore the resources that should be there in the future to replace whatever infrastructure is being used now, those are not being preserved. Only 28% of municipalities gave us credible financial statements at the point of us starting our audit. Many of them relied on the audit process to correct key misstatements and then fortunately publish credible financial information. The reason we point out that only 28% of municipalities gave us quality financials is that it tells you that the vast majority of municipalities do not have in place the key disciplines that provide for credible financial information during the year, which then calls to question the nature of decision-making that's happening during the course of the year and the ability to maintain resilience and the ability to then be agile when things go wrong, when things change during the course of the year. In this year, we reported that over 5 billion Rand was used for financial reporting. And this 5 billion Rand comprised salaries paid to people employed in the finance function, as well as 1 billion Rand paid to consultants. So consultants were brought on board to help 3/4 of our municipalities prepare financial statements for audit. Now, it's not to say there's anything fundamentally problematic about getting financial experts to help you with the more technical aspects of putting together financials that are compliant. Our concern is that in the vast majority of cases, there are municipalities that are spending significant resources to get consultants to help them with the basics. When a municipality doesn't prepare regular reconciliations of their bank account and then expect somebody to come at the end of the year to compile financials, it simply doesn't work. It's costly and it's certainly ineffective. And these are still municipalities that have got people employed in their finance functions, which then brings to question, what do these people do? Why are we having people in those roles that don't have the skills, that don't practice the regular disciplines of reconciling bank accounts, of maintaining records, of preparing even the very basic financial statement? 64% of municipalities did not provide adequate records for their expenditure as required by law. 22 municipalities received disclaimed audit opinions. Another 4 that had disclaimer audit opinions in the previous financial year didn't submit their financials for audit. And many of the municipalities that are receiving disclaimer audit opinions or that are not submitting financials for audit, they are those that are under administration. So administration by the provincial government, instituted in line with the provisions of Section 139 of the Constitution. Now, while it may be necessary to put municipalities under administration, we have to look at what kind of interventions we're putting in place if they do not lead us to the desired change. As an audit office, we've notified the relevant municipal managers responsible for municipalities with repeat disclaimers of material irregularities, and we've done this in terms of the Public Audit Act. We expect that these municipal managers will commit to actions that will prevent any further harm and ensure that there are consequences for those responsible for the dire state of their municipality. If these municipal managers do not respond appropriately, they will leave us no choice but to implement binding remedial action, which is now provided for in law. 86 municipalities failed to comply with supply chain management legislation, and this contributed to irregular expenditure of 26 billion Rand. Now, one might scoff at the topic about irregular expenditure and non-compliance with key laws and regulations as far as it relates to procurement. But to give an example, there's a municipality in the Free State, Machabeng municipality, Velko, and Ventersburg covers that area. Now, Machabeng has had repeat disclaimers for many years. This year, they had a qualified audit opinion. They have had a history of irregular expenditure that goes unattended. And they've got a culture, therefore, where they tend to tolerate deviations from the law in terms of the key prescripts that determine how goods and services ought to be procured if you're using public funds. So they, as a municipality, owe CDBN Water Board 3 billion Rand, 3.6 billion Rand to be exact. They owe ESCOM another 3 billion Rand. They're unable to make those payments. Then CDBN Water itself can't pay suppliers to by the key chemicals required to treat water. And as a result, Citibank Water can't deliver water to the residents of those towns. The municipality's infrastructure for the distribution of water is in such poor condition that there are distribution losses to the tune of over 400 million rand a year. So the delivery of water is a key issue in that municipality. And it is the site of regular service delivery protests because of water disturbances. So the matter about compliance, about financial management, about disciplines of maintaining your infrastructure, of being accountable and of transparently reporting on where you use funds so that you can safeguard the resources you have. Those disciplines are not there, and as a consequence, the lived experiences of the people of Matabele are poor. Another example of the type of financial management problems we find relates to the lack of documentation. When we audited at a number of municipalities, we would select contracts to test, and we would want to test whether or not these expenditures were incurred in a manner that's consistent with the law. And to do that, we need evidence, and that evidence is in the form of documentation. Contracts worth 1.4 billion rand could not be audited by the AGSA staff because those records were simply not made available to us. And that demonstrates some glaring concerns about the commitment to transparency and accountability, and indeed to the rule of law. At year end, the cumulative amount of irregular expenditure not dealt with was 79 billion rand, and this being a clear demonstration that municipalities do not implement concept management. Now, Prof, as a scholar in the area of governance, you'd be more than aware of the amendments to the Public Audit Act, which came into effect on the 1st of April 2019. And these amendments empower my office to report on material irregularities, MIs, and to take action if municipal managers do not deal with them appropriately. We've since implemented the MI process at 57 auditees and issued notifications for 96 material irregularities. 75 of these MIs relate to non-compliance with legislation, which we believe has resulted in or is likely to result in financial loss, which we have estimated at a total of 2 billion rand. Now, the MIs emerge in 4 key areas, and I want to map them out because it's quite important that you notice them. They relate to procurement and payments, interest and penalties, revenue management, investments, and assets. These are not areas that are particularly complex to manage. And these are the same areas where we've been calling for basic disciplines and processes to be put in place, such as making sure that you procure at the right price, making sure that you pay only for what you receive, you make payments on time, you recover the revenue owed to the state, and you safeguard assets. Good preventative controls would have made all the difference in preventing and detecting these matters before they became so material. And I'm going to just highlight one other matter. I just want to, I see that our time is, or my time for this input is nearly up. I just want to make one quick point. In the course of our audits, we also conducted real-time audits on the expenditures of COVID-19 relief fund. And as you know, the municipal response was funded through a combination of equitable share allocation, as well as conditional grants that were specifically provided. Now, when we looked at the manner in which 43 municipalities spent this money, because we focused on only 43, we found the same problems around a lack of adequate planning processes and disciplines, a lack of coordinated planning and implementation of projects, poor procurement processes, such as in the PPE arena. We found evidence where there was a lack of coordination between different players in the value chain so that the ultimate intended outcome was not reached, such as when you provide for sanitation projects. You procure the chemical toilets, but then don't put in place a contract for them to be cleaned regularly, so that the intention of providing safe and sanitized services to people, safe conditions for people, that imperative is then not met. So we believe that whether one looks at the MIs or the normal year-end audits, or even the real-time audits, we come back to the same thing about implementing key preventative controls, about having a leadership that's going to set the right tone at the top, put in place a capable administration, insist that that administration put in place key disciplines to manage public resources properly, and then to hold them accountable. And when things go wrong, implement consequences as swiftly as possible. We have another chance with these elections coming up. We have another chance to get this thing right. Let's put in place the type of leadership that's going to do that which is required and drive the right change so that we can improve the lot of local government. So thank you very much, Prof. I'm going to hand back to you.
Thanks very much indeed, AG. That's a very useful overview. And I could feel my blood pressure having difficulties as you went through the depth of these problems. I'm going to start by just rewinding the tape a little bit if I can. You're a Chapter 9 institution, and you are also independent. You report to Parliament, and I assume you interact directly with the President and have briefed him on your findings from time to time, and you're referring to that. I assume you present to Cabinet, and I presume you engage with COGTA and organizations like SALGA and others regularly. I just want to start by asking you, how many people work in the AG's organization?
Just over 3,500 people work here on a full-time basis.
And what % of your efforts do you think is aimed at local government?
At least half. We do 2 cycles, so I'd say at least half, maybe just under half. Let's call it 40%.
Lovely, thank you. And are you adequately resourced?
Well, one could always do with more resources, especially when we're dealing with the new powers. But for the core mandate, yes, we are.
Lovely. So let me now move on to say to you, it seems what you're describing is a crisis. I've spent a bit of time this year driving back and forth between Johannesburg and Cape Town. I haven't flown, but I've made 4 trips, never on a national road. I go through smaller towns, and I would say 70% of the towns that I've been through, the smaller towns, and indeed some of the big cities like Bloemfontein, are actually more or less collapsing. It reminded me of going to India 30 years ago, or going to Nigeria, where the spaces in which people live from an urban point of view become so dysfunctional that people can't really be productive. And then there's the human rights question of service delivery. So I'm just asking you to sort of give us a comparative point of view. Would you say this is and it sounds like it's not getting better, it's getting marginally worse. Would you describe this? I remember the Irish politician, I'm trying to remember his name, is a congressman in Boston. He said, all politics is from your gate to your front door. And what he meant is that's your electricity, your water, your sanitation. Of course, life's more complex than that now. But would you describe this as a national crisis?
I do believe that we have a crisis within local government. If you look at the financial health problems, if you look at the service delivery issues in different parts of the country, some more pressing than others, but there's no municipality where there aren't pressures. And the ability of all municipalities to respond to the growing and complex and competing needs and wants of citizens, that ability is diminishing, especially in light of an economy that's under pressure. And I suspect that when we get to this next audit, the picture will be even more bleak.
Correct. So you sort of made an allusion to connecting the dots. I want to directly connect the dots to last week, to service delivery, to increasing poverty, to the great danger of alienation. And I'm not asking you to say it the way I'm saying it, but it seems to me that this is a state that cannot deliver to its citizens. Now that must, given your mandate, what are the limits of your mandate? So let's talk about prosecution, for example. Where MMs or CFOs or mayors have not, let's use an example that I read, which is a municipality that has not paid its UIF contributions is surely in breach of the law, and the office holders in a municipality are therefore liable to prosecution. I'm not sure if that's true, but please confirm that. And if it is true, how much prosecution has there been?
So our office doesn't have the rights or responsibilities around prosecutions, because that is the duty of law enforcement. And what we need to do, so what we're required to do is, yes, audit and report, and now our mandate has been expanded to say audit and report, and then keep following up to make sure that the key action is then being taken. Right. The public finance management system places a great duty on the key officials, especially the accounting officer. And if there's a failure such as what you're describing, they need to be held accountable, first of all, by the council. And if the council fails to do that, then we would step in. We can only step in by referring the matter for further investigation, because you can only prosecute once you know what's happening. Correct. So the question being, has there been enough? No, not nearly enough.
No, I'm asking how much. I'm not asking has there been enough. I'm asking how much has there been?
In terms of
I know it's not your mandate.
I'm trying to think. I haven't seen anybody prosecuted for deviations from the MFMA in particular, other than matters relating to VBS, which we saw almost a year ago, where particular municipalities were involved.
So that's a staggering failure of the cluster. So I'm including the NPA, the SAPs, and COGTA in the cluster of state formal government and then Chapter 9 institutions. It's a massive failure of the cluster to act. So you sort of tossing these charges over the wall and not much is happening on the other side.
What we're seeing is that there has been somewhat of an improvement in terms of the responsiveness across many areas of law enforcement. I'll give you an example. So maybe let me start here. Let's recognize that our law enforcement agencies have had a torrid time over the last few years. The capacity, is well documented, well known. The capacity in many of these institutions has been diminished over time, and many of the leaders there are working hard to try and rebuild it. When we did the audits on COVID relief funds, specifically requested to do so by the president, and we did this work last year. We then collaborated with the Fusion Center, and you might recall the Fusion Center was set up to deal with matters in a collaborative way. And what we saw is that because we could do the real-time audits, give our findings and observations over to that combination of law enforcement bodies, and they took their requisite part and moved. You saw in a very short space of time, people in the dock where they had tried to defraud UIF, where they tried to defraud SASSA. You saw funds being frozen where people had tried to do wrong. And I think that's what we've got to insist on more of that. All I'm saying is there is hope. We're seeing those green shoots. We must insist on more of that so that there is swift action and people are brought to book. Because that's the only way you're going to, first of all, safeguard resources while they're still there, get them back, but also push back on a culture that tends to tolerate wrongdoing.
So so obviously that's a very big issue, your ability to influence the Fusion project, to let the public see that their tax money and the services this government has promised them and that are built into our constitution are delivered. And so that's obviously a very vital strategic role you play, is to accelerate that Fusion project and ensure the public and show the public this level of prosecution. I know it's not your core job, but it would seem that we're losing confidence in government. And this is a way of rectifying it, is through prosecution. Let me turn to the next observation, which you've touched on in your introduction, which is capacity and capabilities. There must be, I'm sure, significant effort going into improving the technical capacity of municipalities to function. For example, we hear that most municipalities do not have qualified water engineers. The electrical skills needed to distribute electricity in municipalities also very short. And I'm sure that financial skills are also very short. So what is the good news you know about? I know, again, it's not your mandate, but that you know about that is being undertaken now in the last few years to improve the managerial, technical, and administrative capacity of municipalities?
You know, there have been a lot of interventions by the national government, provincial government, by other players who've put time, money, resources into helping local government, not just on the financial management aspects, which we see very closely, but on the other technical aspects, such as engineering, etc. What we're seeing is that without stability of political and administrative leadership, those interventions do not bear fruit. And that's why, Prof, you see us calling for focus on establishing the right type of leader. So to make a slightly different point, if you don't have a skilled person, things are not going to run well. If you have a skilled person that's there for a very short time, they don't have the opportunity to get to know the environment, to establish the key controls, to build a team around them so that when they leave, there is some predictability about how this is going to operate. Whether it's in finance or in the engineering services, doesn't matter. For us, it's the same sort of thing. So when we talk about what we're seeing around financial management, we're highlighting not just the problem around financial management, but the tendency to outsource key functions of municipalities and the inability to attract and retain the key skills that are required to drive change. And we're able to use that message to then also compare it with what we're seeing around audit outcomes. The auditees that do well on audit outcomes, and often that is matched by their service delivery record, they are the ones where you've got stable leadership at political level, at administrative level, where you've got, yes, competence, but you've got stability at those levels. And you've got the level of collaboration and space being given to the complementary roles that the political leadership and the administrative leadership must play. Distinct, yet complementary roles. When you listen to the mayor of, say, a local municipality in the Eastern Cape, a small municipality, but they've had a clean audit now for, I think, now the 7th year. That mayor talks about how she has her role, the CFO and the MM have their role. And they are very clear, and they've been in their roles for a long time, at least a 5-year period. And that's what we're seeing. Where things go well is that when you've got that stability at key levels, including MM and CFO. And then the reverse is true. Where you've got instability, where you've got a CFO that's either vacant, the role is vacant, or it's filled for a very short time, that's where you have these disclaimers. The disclaimer audit opinions are those where you've got a CFO that's in their role for less than 2 years, and the other side is for 5 years plus. So you've got to have leadership.
I've got it. So when you look to COGTA or to SALGA about this next local government election you referred to, and the selection of councillors as nominees of political parties, is there anything new that you can see on the horizon that's going to happen there? Because it seems in many municipalities and small towns, local government is a form of revenue in communities. And so there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of pressure for corruption. Do you see any structural intervention by SALGA, COGTA, or any other agency? And what about the political parties themselves about how they might select their nominees in this next election, if this election happens? Because for the moment, it looks like it may well be delayed or postponed. The Mosaneki report is dealing with that. But do you see something new on the horizon here? Why would I put my hand up to be a councillor when I'm joining a very dysfunctional organization? You're really asking people to step into a very tricky situation and serve their country by making sure that the right things are done in the right way at the right time. So do you see anything structured about induction, about training? Because these are complex things for a councillor to deal with, the budgeting, the PFMA, all these technical administrative requirements. Is there any step change there that you see coming?
So there are a number of different institutions that you've mentioned that are starting to think differently and are seeing our message, and we're hearing them respond to our message in different ways. If you look at the political parties, we've heard from, reading from the media now, you can see that the ANC certainly heard our message, and they're making they're making commentary about the importance of dealing with the leadership issues. You're hearing it from the DA, given the press releases that they've issued following our reports. And so that's encouraging in that they're hearing and our message. What we've got to make sure then, all of us as citizens, is that it is then followed by the requisite action. So we're seeing a receptiveness to the message we put out. We're also seeing that the way that SALGA is looking at the capacity building process looks like it's going to be slightly different from what we've done before. Instead of just piling on resources to keep driving capacity, they're also focusing on the need to put in place the type of leadership that has the skills, the qualifications, and the capability to do what's required. The induction process, you're quite right. One can't underestimate the importance of proper induction and ongoing knowledge sharing for councillors, so that whether you are on MPAC or not, you actually understand how the council should operate. You understand your duties as being distinct from the administration. You understand how you empower that administration to do what's required and then hold them accountable. The work, therefore, will sit with the political parties, it'll sit with the voters, the political parties, it'll sit then also with the different players, SALGA, COCTA, ourselves, APAC, which is the Association for Public Accounts, working together with NAMPAC, which is being established to support and coordinate the work of the members of municipal public accounts committees in the municipalities. And of course, we will participate in that work as well. So we remain hopeful that our message is being heeded and everybody sees with understanding that we've got to do things differently and trying to figure out how that must happen.
So, the description of the problem is not the solution to the problem. And I'm just wondering who takes the initiative about, for example, induction. And this dreadful problem we've had of a type of deployment that has led to incapable people being put in technical positions, and then all the pressure for friends and families to be sort of brought into the economic largesse of local government. And these are really fundamental things, and I really wish you well on initiating this or making sure that it is initiated, because it seems this has been very weak in the past, in any form of induction that I'm referring to. I'm going to open up to the floor in a minute, but I just want to go back to the events of last week. I mean, I'm sure from where you're sitting, because you really do have a high level overview of how this country functions or malfunctions, that I'm sure you would agree, and tell me if you would differ, that the events of last week have a political element, but they had a huge socio-economic element to them, where communities are impoverished, are trapped, are unable to find employment, are dependent on the state, and they've expressed a degree of behavior that is going to cause the nation state project, our democratic project, to really come under pressure. Tell us a bit about how you felt about what you saw last week.
Prof, I sat back and yes, there's a political issue, but what was quite glaring for me, and I think for all of us as South Africans, what we've got to contend with is the fact that inequality and poverty, unemployment, those things we've been talking about for many years now, but have done little to genuinely address. That's what's confronting us. So I sat back and I recognized that we've been very eloquent about agreeing with one another about the importance of doing these things, but woefully inadequate in actually dealing with it. So it brought into sharp focus the urgency with which we've got to deal with this, and the notion that if we continue to neglect it, we really are going to face up to the consequences of a failed democracy. And none of us want that. So I think it was a wake-up call, and I hope that all of us see that.
Well, let's now move to the questions. I don't know if you're able to look at the chats. There are many, many comments mainly, but there are many questions also. And so some of them are fairly general. Are there plans to create a professional bureaucracy at all levels of government? I'm not quite sure what that means, but you may respond to that. I think it's similar to the question I was asking you about the structural interventions that might be different. Overall percentage of clients using. Are you partnering in small towns and getting the resources in? I've been working in an excellent project in Clanwilliam where we've constructed under the leadership of people in Clanwilliam, farmers and pastors and NGOs and the municipality and small business, a Clanwilliam partnership on how to take it forward. Are you beginning to see that? We saw the water challenge in, I'm trying to remember where it was, in the Northwest, where local people took control of the water and fixed it. And then the consequence of clover being such a big issue. Councils provide with support staff who's skilled. I'm just looking for questions here for you. What will it take for government to change its strategy and skills base? I think we've talked a bit about that. I'm just looking, so I'm going to run to the end of the chats. Please post some questions, specific questions. Is there a minimum requirement in educationally for a councillor? That's an interesting question. What skills does a councillor have to be appointed? I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about technical knowledge and skill. Let's see what else. What is new, sorry, just before you go ahead, I'll tell you what is new that's really interesting is the MI and the real-time audit. The new Act gives you new powers, and that is a very important capacity that you're bringing. So any comments on the chats that you might be looking at? Wide range of skills. Yeah,
there are just so many. I thought, yeah, maybe we could take. So the one about is there a minimum requirement for councillor qualifications? No, there isn't, because I guess we've also got to balance the need to make sure that these are public representatives, right? So our view is that the work of oversight is not that complex. It really isn't, in the vast majority of instances. The principles of making sure that you set up a capable administration and you give them space to execute on their duties, and you oversee them, and you insist on credible information on an ongoing basis, and you hold people accountable when things go wrong. We don't think that that is particularly difficult if councillors are equipped with proper induction and ongoing training. It really isn't a tall order. If you set up an administration that is staffed by capable public servants who want to do good, and you make sure that that administration is characterized by stability. That's what wins the day, more than technical qualifications. The MI process, so since the law came into being 2 years ago, we've been asked, when are you putting people in jail, right? So, and we always have pains to say, look, our job is to audit and report, and we follow up on whether or not our recommendations have been implemented by the people that are the appointed stewards over public funds. So it's the accounting officer, the municipal manager in this, who is accountable for managing public finance. They're supposed to set up proper internal controls and accepting that things will not always be perfect. When internal audit or external audit comes back with findings, they're supposed to then implement the key actions required. If let's say there's a non-compliance and there's irregular expenditure reported, that's not criminality in the first instance. It's not. What is problematic is when it's not followed up. So the accounting officer is required to investigate what happened, figure out if there's been wrongdoing, get the money back, cancel contracts that are irregular, report matters to law enforcement where that's required. But in many instances, it's about training people and disciplining staff. So if they do that, then we don't have to step in. The Act now says that we only step in if they don't do it. So if they don't investigate, then we will refer for investigation. And if they don't act following that investigation, then we issue binding remedial action, which really escalates the matter and forces them to implement what's required. And it would be the same actions that they should have implemented. And then we can issue a certificate of debt if there is failure to implement binding remedial action. And that certificate of debt is in the name of the accounting officer that failed to safeguard public resources, that essentially neglected their duty to act as a noble steward. So that's why it would hit them in the pocket. So we've now been implementing this for 2 years. This is the first time we implemented at 57 municipalities. In the first year, we did it only at 9 municipalities because we had to phase it in. It was a new piece of legislation, came in 1st of April. We started audits on this at the local government level at the end of August. So it's been a pretty rapid take on of this. So I'm very proud of the team at the AGSA for having done what we've done. We're now at a point where we've, so we are referring matters to law enforcement and people are responding. The good thing, Prof, and I think this is important to say, measure of success on this piece of legislation is not only going to be about the number of certificates of debt that we issue. It's going to be about whether or not it inspires quick, adequate, and responsible action by the accounting officers. And we're seeing that. So we're not issuing certificates of debt yet because we're seeing some responsiveness. When we issue these MIs, we're seeing that the accounting officers are setting about recovering funds that are being lost, sorting out internal controls that are resulting in losses, such as what we've seen in a number of municipalities. So there is some good activity that is being inspired by this piece of legislation. And the real-time audits, that was also...
Yes, I was going to ask that. Go ahead.
That was also a piece of innovation we put in place just about a year ago. And what that has allowed us to do is to give real-time information to those that must act. So a great story was at the UIF, where very quickly, within the first 3 months of them implementing the terrorist benefit, we could identify for them key controls that were missing so that they were paying people twice, they were paying employers that didn't qualify for the benefit. The monies were going to people who should not have received it. So, and then they were denying benefits to valid beneficiaries or valid applicants. They fixed those controls. And when we went back after another 3 months to check on their transactions, we found that they'd been able to go and fetch 3.5 billion rand of money back into their purse because of monies that were paid inappropriately. And there were fewer instances of invalid rejections. So that what we're saying is that the recovery of funds that were being lost was evident. The improvement of control so that you could stem any further leakage, that was also evident. And that's what we want to see. And of course, through the work with the Fusion Center, those that were doing wrong in trying to defraud the scheme, those were now being held accountable, as you saw people in the dock, which again is what we want to see.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to come to an end. I'm going to give you a minute or two at the end just to summarize, but I'm looking for any hands that are up to make a quick comment online. I did want to just raise with you, is there small towns are the ones that I've really noticed? You know, clearly big cities are the engine of growth in a nation like ours. And urbanization is continuing and we face massive pressures in our big cities. But small towns are also vital for the economy. And if you don't want everyone to leave small towns, we better stabilize them. So I'm just wondering if there's a program for small town MMs and how they share best practice and how you can encourage that. Because it seems to me that there's not a, you know, business schools try and teach people in business how to run an organization, but who teaches an MM? Is there a program? You know, how do I qualify to be an MM of a small town? Because I'm quite sure small towns have different scale and different issues, different poverty levels, different infrastructure than big cities. So is there such a program? But let me see if anyone wants to come into the conversation and pose a question, and you can respond to mine in a minute. Anybody want to just come online? And I'm asking the technical team if someone wants to put their hand up now. Are they able to? Because I can't see whose hand is up. Is there anybody who wants to speak? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask just a small question. AG, don't you think that what at municipal level we must focus on is building the capacity of the councillors, particularly the municipal public accounts committees, as oversight bodies so that they can be able to intervene. They've got powers to intervene and be trained properly. Thank you very much.
Would you like to respond to that directly?
Yeah, a very quick response would be, yes, we ought to spend more time ensuring that all the members of council know and understand their duties, and we've got to equip the members of the Municipal Public Accounts Committee with the skills and the competencies that are required to help them do their work. So we do need to spend a great deal more effort in equipping them there, and also making sure that they are stable. You see, if you don't have a council that understands the importance of an effective impact, then they are not going to appoint their best councillors to it, and then they're not going to give space to the impact to build the team, so that they're not going to keep it stable enough so that it becomes effective. So you've got to make sure that the full council understands the responsibilities and the value that comes out of an effective impact, and then you can invest in capacity building for impact. It's one thing to build capacity, but if you don't have a council, political leadership that understands the importance of strong impact, then it will all be for naught. The question you asked, Prof, about the program for MMs, I'm aware that SALGA has been doing a number of capacity building initiatives over many years. And I'm also aware that the National School of Government is doing a great deal of work, particularly in the provincial and national government, but I'm seeing them looking to do more work in the local government sphere. What you're calling for is a specialized program that equips the MMs from smaller towns. I think it's a good idea. It's something we'll certainly look out for. And we're very happy to.
I keep coming back to your fusion. It's how your chain in the ecosystem between COGTA, SALGA, the APAC, the other bodies, SAICA, all of these professional bodies. You know, South Africans have a vested interest in this working properly, not just from a humanitarian point of view, but from a taxpayer point of view. We want our taxes to be paid, to be spent wisely and productively. And we're not seeing that. And I'm hearing your optimism, but you're saying, you know, SALGA's been doing this for many years, but the results are not there for us to see as citizens. So let me leave it there. There's a question here that is interesting. What is your comment on the degree of politicization in local government? Interference.
Political interference. So that's the point we were making about the importance of ensuring that the political leadership understands that their role is complementary. It's distinct and complementary to the administration. They should not be.
The question is how much interference is there?
You know, where there's interference, that's where things go wrong. Where there is stability and there is respect for different roles, that's where things run well. And that's where we can bring to bear different examples. Look at Senu, which I talked about. Look at a number of municipalities in the Western Cape. We get the same feedback because we keep asking our teams, why do things work here and not there? And the feedback that keeps coming back is the type of leadership you have. If you look at, I'll give you another example. Look at Mogalakwena in Limpopo. That's been the site of political instability for many years, right? And so that municipality doesn't function well. This year, they have an adverse audit opinion. When we dug deeper, they spent 34 million rand of taxpayer funds on a consultant to help them compile financials. Then we asked, but is there nobody there to do financials? No, there are people employed to the tune of 111 million rand a year. So that amount of money is going towards putting financials together that the AG can hardly set. So we asked again, why is this? Turns out there was no CFO during the year. Other officials in the municipality acted for short periods as CFO. Of course, they don't have the skills, and without stability, you really have no hope of having proper discipline. So it doesn't matter, even if you're spending 145 million rand of taxpayer funds, you will never get what you need if you don't have stable leadership at the top.
I'm going to give the floor to you to make any last comments, but I've got two more questions if I can. The first is there anything in your mandate that would preclude you from talking to communities? So if a small town wanted you to come to a town and share with the community the experience you have and the knowledge you have about the questions they should be asking of their political representatives, is that in your mandate or is it outside your mandate?
We would be able to do that. Fortunately, we have a set of teams right across the country. So we cover, every single municipality right across the country. And so there's always somebody available to talk to the council. And yes, we can sit with citizens and equip them. Yes, and we can sit with citizens and equip them on the type of information that they can ask for and help them understand our report as part of equipping them to participate and exercise their democratic right as citizens. So we can, there's absolutely nothing to preclude us from doing that.
And are you precluded from finding partnerships with professionals where towns have difficulty with water or electricity or accounting to get them to assist, not for fees, but in a pro bono tu mamina basis?
So what we can do is collaborate with different institutions for different things. However, what we can't do is do work that we then come and audit ourselves. So we have to maintain some independence between ourselves and the work that's done there. But in between that, we can certainly work with different professional bodies, as we've done before. We've worked very closely with with SAICA and with SAIGA on different projects that are aimed at capacity building in different parts of the country.
Lovely. I'm going to give the floor to you to make any last comments you would, but I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. And you've had a big audience today of nearly 200 people. I'm impressed with your enthusiasm and knowledge. And I just want to say, this is you sit in a vital institution. It may be not on everyone's mind every day, but it's the consequences of the public protector, the Auditor-General's office, these Chapter 9 institutions, is really what gives life to our democracy and what will cause it to succeed or not. So I want to end by giving you the floor, and thanking you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you once again for the opportunity to talk to you and to the audience for giving me this chance to share the insights from our work. I'll just conclude by saying the following, that audit outcomes can never be separated from the lived experiences of citizens, as I've demonstrated through the number of examples I've given. In some communities, failure on audit outcomes also correlates with failure to deliver services and with an increase to instability and to service delivery protests. Where accountability fails and limited public resources are financially mismanaged, service delivery is also likely to fail. If we want to improve the living conditions of the people of this country, we have to address the prevailing weaknesses in how local government functions. And this starts with ensuring that local government is led and run by people that embrace the key values that must underpin how government functions. Those of capability, professional ethics, accountability, and transparency. People who stay the course, and people who are also supported by citizens that take an active interest in maintaining the integrity of public institutions. So with that, I thank you all for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thanks so much, AG. And we're all shareholders in your organization. So as shareholders, we really wish you great success and lots of new energy as you continue to change this and improve it faster than we're unraveling. I read a lovely book called The Unraveling, and the opposite of unraveling is raveling. And so we need you raveling out there, pulling us all together and being stern where you need to and supportive where we need you. And thank you to you and all the professionals in the AG's office, all 3,500, for the work you're going to do in time ahead. We wish you well. And thank you to the audience for coming. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly found it insightful. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions with a group this big. It's more or less very difficult to do. But we look forward to seeing you at another GIBS Flash Forum, and enjoy the rest of your day. Let's all get back to work and be productive. Thank you so much, AG. All the best to you.